So, Tom Bower has apparently seen page 14 of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's prenuptial agreement. And he claims there is a highly specific, hidden divorce clause in there that Prince Harry allegedly signed without fully understanding its long-term financial consequences. Now, before we even get into the weeds of whether that is definitively true or not, the mere fact that this specific claim currently exists in the public sphere is genuinely wild, because it would essentially explain absolutely everything. If you have been closely watching the Sussexes over the last few years and thinking that some of their sudden, aggressive business pivots just do not make any logical sense, this is the exact missing puzzle piece that might actually connect them all. And remember, Tom Bower isn't just some random tabloid gossip casually speculating on a podcast. He is the guy who literally wrote the definitive, explosive book on Meghan Markle, Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the war between the Windsors. His entire decades-long professional reputation is firmly built on digging up the exact things that incredibly powerful, wealthy people really, truly do not want dug up. Before we go any further down this massive rabbit hole, if you enjoy analytical deep dives into complex royal drama that strip away the PR spin, hit subscribe and join us here. To truly understand why Tom Bower's professional opinion carries such immense, terrifying weight in elite London and Hollywood circles, you simply have to look at his unparalleled track record. He is absolutely not a celebrity gossip writer looking for a quick clickbait headline. He is a former barrister, a highly trained legal mind, and a veteran investigative journalist who has spent decades ruthlessly going after some of the most protected litigious public figures in the world. We are talking about billionaires and power brokers like Richard Branson, Tony Blair, Robert Maxwell, and Simon Cowell. And here is the absolute most important detail: none of those incredibly wealthy, highly litigious people have ever successfully sued him for defamation. That specific detail matters profoundly because massive global publishing companies simply aren't stupid. They have armies of corporate lawyers. They are absolutely not going to publish explosive, potentially career-ending claims that haven't been meticulously, exhaustively, legally vetted, risking ending up in a high court paying out millions in damages. So, when Tom Bower formally publishes something or goes on the record making a claim, it is because it has survived that grueling legal process. Bower has stated himself that he doesn't write biographies about people he actually likes. He writes exclusively about people whose lives are deliberately shrouded in thick mystery, people who desperately want to hide their darkest secrets. And he simply keeps digging relentlessly until he uncovers exactly what they don't want the public to know. When Meghan Markle dramatically came onto the global royal scene, Bower thought the entire dynamic was utterly fascinating and immediately started looking into how this massive cultural collision was ultimately going to play out. He has openly admitted that he spoke to very few of Meghan's actual current friends because, according to him, she allegedly put out what he described as a fatwa on anyone in her inner circle talking to him. He sent dozens and dozens of emails to her associates, and the vast majority of them didn't even dare to reply. So, like any brilliant investigative journalist, he just went around them. He found the other people, former colleagues, discarded childhood friends, ex-boyfriends, and people with incredibly detailed first-hand knowledge of very different, specific stages of her early career before the royal spotlight. His reporting heavily relies on hundreds of interviews, documented public records, legal filings, and extensive granular research. That is exactly why, when Tom Bower makes a claim about a legal document, the entire royal ecosystem stops and pays very close attention. But here is where we have to be incredibly, rigorously careful as consumers of media. There is a massive, distinct difference between what Tom Bower has formally, legally published in his books and what he has openly speculated about in various television and podcast interviews. He has publicly and loudly discussed his personal views on Harry and Meghan Markle's incredibly complex finances and their post-royal legal arrangements. However, there is absolutely no verified public evidence confirming that he has personally, physically examined their original prenuptial agreement, reviewed specific clauses within it, or verified its exact contents through the elite lawyers who were actually involved in drafting it. That crucial distinction is vital to keep in mind as we navigate through all of these explosive allegations. What Tom Bower is fundamentally arguing is that the complex legal and financial architecture currently surrounding Harry and Meghan Markle's sprawling business interests could become critically, dangerously important if their marriage were ever to end. And according to his analysis, that is exactly where this story takes a massive, dramatic turn. Most standard, civilian prenuptial agreements are relatively fairly simple documents. They clearly outline the specific financial assets each person brings into the marriage. They explicitly explain exactly how property and wealth would be divided if the couple separates, and they often include standard provisions for spousal support or basic financial protections. Royal marriages, however, are infinitely more complex because they intrinsically involve ancient royal titles, taxpayer-funded public duties, sovereign immunity issues, and massive assets that are permanently connected to the crown itself. The actual granular details of royal prenuptial agreements are fiercely guarded and entirely private, But we do know exactly how royal divorce settlements have historically addressed highly sensitive issues like titles, financial payouts, and official public status. For example, after her incredibly bitter, highly publicized divorce from King Charles, Diana famously retained the specific title Diana, Princess of Wales, but she was brutally, officially stripped of the style of Her Royal Highness. So, these high-level royal separations inherently involve far, far more than an ordinary private financial agreement between two wealthy people. Harry and Meghan Markle's current situation is also heavily, unavoidably shaped by California state law, where incredibly strict community property rules can massively affect assets, real estate, and income earned during a marriage. That legal reality means that massive earnings from commercial ventures launched while they were legally married, such as their colossal, multi-million-dollar media deals with Netflix and Spotify, or their joint business projects under the Archewell umbrella, could become highly relevant and potentially split right down the middle in the disastrous event of a divorce, depending heavily on the specific circumstances and any private legal agreements existing between the couple. Tom Bower has passionately argued that these specific legal and financial issues could become especially explosively significant if the marriage were ever to hit the rocks. But again, there is absolutely no publicly verified, concrete evidence that Harry and Meghan Markle's prenuptial agreement contains highly specific, predatory clauses governing their Netflix earnings, their intellectual property rights, the overarching Sussex brand, or the massive profits from Harry's explosive memoir, Spare. The actual legal terms of any such agreement have never ever been made public. And honestly, that is kind of the entire friction point with this story. We are currently dealing with a massive amount of highly educated interpretation, built securely on a foundation of known facts, but the absolute most explosive claims, the specific traps allegedly hidden on page 14, haven't been independently, legally confirmed by anyone inside the camp. That being said, Bower's broader overarching argument is that Meghan Markle has actively, aggressively played the leading, dominant role in managing many of their massive joint business ventures and has been highly publicly associated as the driving creative force behind the major commercial projects undertaken by the couple. Under California law, the ultimate ownership and the eventual division of income from those massive ventures would absolutely depend on a very complex range of legal factors, including any ironclad agreements the couple may have securely in place. Tom Bower has argued that these specific, highly structured financial arrangements could ultimately, massively benefit Meghan Markle if the marriage were ever to end. However, there is no publicly verified evidence that she possesses a primary, overriding legal claim to absolutely all of their shared revenue streams. Nor is there any verified evidence that Harry and Meghan Markle actively amended a prenuptial agreement after their spectacular 2018 royal wedding, or the deeply alarming claim that Prince Harry blindly signed such a massive legal amendment without fully reviewing or understanding its long-term implications. Those specific claims have simply not been independently confirmed by any legal body. What we do absolutely know is that prenuptial agreements can legally be amended after a marriage has already taken place, and that practice is actually not unusual at all among the ultra-wealthy. Couples frequently update their postnuptial agreements following major life-altering changes like having children, purchasing massively significant assets like a Montecito mansion, relocating to a different country, or launching massive new corporate businesses together. Whether Harry and Meghan Markle actually ever amended a prenuptial agreement to reflect their new billionaire-adjacent lifestyle has never been publicly confirmed. Tom Bower has heavily suggested that their financial arrangements rapidly, necessarily evolved as their specific circumstances drastically changed following their dramatic, unprecedented departure from official royal duties in early 2020, when they permanently moved to California and immediately signed major, multi-year commercial deals. But there is absolutely no publicly verified evidence that they actually executed a formal prenuptial amendment at that specific time. And this is exactly where the public narrative starts to get a little bit tangled and chaotic, because you have Tom Bower making these incredibly bold structural claims, and then you simultaneously have all these other wild, unverified tabloid reports constantly circulating about the fragile state of their marriage. We have all seen the endless reports about them allegedly sleeping in separate beds, about Meghan Markle allegedly secretly looking up high-powered Hollywood divorce lawyers, about Prince Harry allegedly spending significant amounts of time hiding away in luxury hotel rooms as an escape from the pressure of his own home. Outlets like Radar Online have aggressively published claims that Meghan Markle is visibly cracking under the immense pressure of public scrutiny and financial strain, reportedly wondering aloud if she would actually be significantly better off as a highly successful solo act rather than part of a polarizing royal duo. But it is crucial to remember that those specific tabloid reports are almost entirely coming from unnamed, shadowy insiders, and absolutely none of it has been confirmed by anyone on the record. What is genuinely interesting, however, is exactly how Tom Bower actively connects all of this current financial maneuvering to Meghan Markle's previous highly secretive divorce from Hollywood producer Trevor Engelson. When that specific divorce abruptly happened, very little about the actual legal or financial negotiations became public knowledge, and many granular details regarding the split remained fiercely private. Tom Bower vehemently argues that her earlier bruising experiences in the brutal Hollywood legal system fundamentally influenced exactly how she approached massive business, legal, and media decisions immediately after marrying Prince Harry. People who have actively worked closely with Meghan Markle in the industry have frequently described her as incredibly detail-oriented, highly focused, and incredibly sharp when it comes to negotiating contracts and executing major business decisions. Tom Bower argues that those specific learned experiences heavily influenced exactly how she approached structuring their future commercial ventures after marrying into the royal family. However, there is no publicly verified evidence that her previous divorce directly, legally shaped any specific legal arrangements in her current marriage to Harry. What is entirely publicly known, and a matter of corporate record, is that Harry and Meghan Markle triumphantly signed major, headline-grabbing commercial deals with streaming giants Netflix and Spotify immediately after stepping back from their royal duties, marking the highly anticipated beginning of their post-royal business strategy. Archewell, their sprawling hybrid foundation and business organization, was formally established around the exact same period. Tom Bower argues that their complex financial and business arrangements became increasingly, legally important as those massive projects rapidly expanded in scope. But again, there is no publicly verified evidence that Harry and Meghan Markle amended a prenuptial agreement during the specific chaotic period, or that such an updated agreement legally granted Meghan Markle ultimate, overriding control over their highly lucrative joint brand. Public corporate records absolutely do show Meghan Markle serving in primary leadership roles within the Archewell corporate structure. But those specific titles do not automatically establish sole ownership rights in the devastating event of a legal separation. And this is exactly where the broader financial picture starts to look a little bit dicey for the couple, entirely regardless of whether the dramatic prenup claims are actually true. The massive Netflix agreement was widely, aggressively reported in the press as being worth up to an astonishing $100 million. But deep industry reporting has consistently quietly noted that this massive number represented the absolute maximum potential value of the contract rather than a massive upfront cash payment handed over on day one. The final actual amount they would receive depended entirely on completed successful productions and hitting very specific contractual milestones. Harry and Meghan Markle did successfully release their massive record-breaking documentary series, and Meghan Markle's solo lifestyle programming has recently moved forward. But several other highly publicized announced projects, including the ambitious animated series Pearl, were abruptly canceled by Netflix entirely before production even began. This means that several massive, highly lucrative elements of the original, highly touted partnership never actually came to fruition. Tom Bower passionately argues that their Netflix partnership ultimately generated far, far less actual cash in the bank than the massive headline figures breathlessly reported when the deal was first announced to the world. The exact final amount they received has never been publicly confirmed by either party, but Bower believes their overarching business strategy abruptly shifted as several planned high-profile projects failed to move forward. Around that exact same time of internal corporate recalibration, Meghan Markle very noticeably began aggressively developing her own, entirely separate lifestyle brand, now globally known as American Riviera Orchard. Public trademark filings heavily reflected that massive solo effort. She also quietly created several new business entities securely connected to her own personal ventures, functioning entirely outside of the joint Archewell umbrella. Tom Bower argues that these highly calculated, distinct corporate moves firmly point to a much broader, long-term financial strategy designed to protect her own assets. But there is absolutely no publicly verified evidence that these moves were part of dark preparations for a looming divorce, or a cynical asset protection plan against Harry. Public corporate records likewise absolutely do not confirm the wild tabloid claims about secret separate investment accounts or massive legal restructuring specifically designed for that purpose. Bower says these recent developments clearly show Meghan Markle aggressively strengthening her independent solo commercial position, although those specific conclusions remain his own interpretation rather than independently verified fact. But when you truly zoom out and look objectively at the timeline, it is incredibly hard not to notice the distinct shifting pattern. Meghan Markle has increasingly undeniably pursued major business projects entirely under her own name. Her recent, highly publicized podcast partnership with Lemonada Media was grandly announced as a strictly solo venture. Her children's book, The Bench, was published entirely as her own personal project. Tom Bower strongly argues that 2022 marked a massive, highly significant shift in their dynamic, with Meghan Markle placing vastly greater emphasis on building a completely independent commercial identity that did not rely on her husband. While Harry and Meghan Markle absolutely continue to work together on selected high-profile philanthropic ventures and tours, she was very clearly methodically building something entirely separate. Bauer firmly believes this reflects a much broader, highly calculated long-term strategy. Although there is no publicly verified evidence that these specific business decisions were secretly connected to preparations for a divorce or tied to any private legal agreement between the couple. Now, there is another fascinating layer to this entire saga that makes the whole thing even more incredibly complicated. Tom Bauer has also heavily highlighted Meghan Markle's reported ongoing relationship with Sunshine Sachs, the aggressive, elite public relations firm that fiercely represented her during part of her highly controversial time as a working royal in the UK. Sunshine Sachs has successfully, ruthlessly represented many high-profile Hollywood celebrities over the years, specifically including massive clients deeply involved in major public controversies, intense media scrutiny, and high-profile legal separations. Harry and Meghan Markle later publicly ended their relationship with the firm as they attempted to build their own in-house communications operation directly through Arcuel. But then reportedly Meghan Markle quietly brought Sunshine Sachs back into the fold. And that specific hidden detail raised a massive amount of questions in the PR world. Because if you are quietly bringing back the exact same aggressive PR firm that successfully represented you during your previous massive public reinvention, people are absolutely going to wonder why you suddenly need that specific kind of heavy artillery again. However, there is absolutely no publicly verified evidence that changes in PR representation were secretly connected to preparations for a divorce, or that any such defensive strategy existed. Tom Bauer simply argues that Meghan Markle's growing intense focus on her own solo business ventures heavily reflects a broader effort to build an independent commercial identity, and that returning to her old PR roots was part of that plan. Those conclusions remain entirely his own interpretation. And honestly, the sheer fact that the couple hasn't directly, aggressively addressed a lot of this growing speculation is a massive part of why it keeps swirling so out of control. There was that highly publicized, shocking report in Vanity Fair about someone allegedly acting directly on Meghan Markle's behalf, having a very quiet, off-the-record conversation with a major publishing house specifically to gauge interest in a massive book deal about a hypothetical post-divorce scenario. The explosive article clearly stated that the unidentified person made it explicitly clear the couple were absolutely not getting divorced, but was simply seeking to know, purely hypothetically, if such a divorce did happen, would the publisher theoretically be interested in acquiring a book that took place in its devastating aftermath? Nothing was ever officially put on paper. Absolutely no formal offer was made, no manuscript was ever produced. But that incredibly damaging claim went entirely, completely unchallenged by the notoriously litigious Sussexes, which strikes a massive amount of people in the media industry as incredibly suspicious. If it absolutely wasn't true, why not aggressively deny it? Why not sue the publication? The deafening silence around that one highly specific report has only fueled vastly more intense speculation, because this is a royal couple that has never ever been shy about heavily pushing back against tabloid stories they consider inaccurate or defamatory. Their bizarre willingness to let that particular highly damaging detail just sit out there without a single coordinated denial is something that even their most ardent critics find genuinely totally puzzling. Tom Bauer has also heavily speculated about the ultimate future of Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage, offering his own dire predictions about exactly how events could brutally unfold. Those predictions remain his own personal assessment and have not been supported by any publicly available evidence. While California state law sets very clear, strict residency and waiting period requirements for any divorce proceedings, there is absolutely no verified indication that either Harry or Meghan Markle has begun, or actually intends to begin, any legal divorce proceedings. Meghan Markle has publicly, successfully established California as the primary base for her personal and business activities for several years now. Tom Bauer heavily argues that if they were ever to actually divorce, California law, combined with any heavily guarded private agreements between them, would absolutely legally shape exactly how their massive finances and sprawling business interests are handled. But there is absolutely no publicly verified evidence that their original prenuptial agreement contained secret predatory clauses governing the usage of royal titles, the ultimate ownership of Arcuel, control over intellectual property rights, or severely restricting Harry's ability to profit from future media projects. Nor is there any verified evidence supporting the wild claim that Harry signed a later legal amendment completely without fully understanding its devastating contents. Massive legal questions involving the ownership of their $14 million Montecito home, their shared liquid assets, or their ongoing business ventures would ultimately depend entirely on California law and the specific highly classified terms of any private agreements they hold, none of which have ever been made public. Child custody of Archie and Lilibet would also be determined entirely by a California family court based strictly on the best interests of the children, rather than automatically favoring either the prince or the Duchess. Tom Bower has confidently offered his own, highly critical interpretation of exactly how such massive legal issues might be resolved in court, but those conclusions remain entirely speculative and have absolutely not been independently verified. What Bower continually, relentlessly keeps coming back to is the core idea that Prince Harry may genuinely not fully understand the incredibly complex legal and financial consequences of a possible separation. He constantly points to Harry's highly emotional, visibly strained appearances during his various, bruising legal battles in London as clear signs of the immense, crushing pressure he has been under, though there is absolutely no independent evidence linking those stressful courtroom moments to the actual state of his marriage. Tom Bower argues that Harry appears to be under rapidly growing personal and legal pressure, but there is no publicly verified evidence linking that specifically to his relationship with Meghan. He also heavily suggests that Harry may simply lack the legal acumen to fully understand the financial consequences of his own legal battles, though that entirely remains Bower's own interpretation. There is a massive recurring theme in Bower's overall analysis that Prince Harry has consistently, tragically been outmaneuvered in high-stakes situations requiring detailed, granular contractual knowledge, and that his inherent tendency to blindly trust people and rely entirely on his own emotional judgment, rather than securing careful, ruthless legal review, has put him in an incredibly vulnerable position that he may not even fully recognize yet. If you zoom all the way out and look at the entire sprawling picture, Tom Bower is essentially making a massive, highly detailed circumstantial case that the complex financial arrangements structured around this royal marriage have been built in a highly specific way that can become incredibly legally significant if things ever actually fall apart. He has pointed to Meghan Markle's previous legal experience with divorce, her highly detail-oriented approach to corporate contracts, the highly suspicious timing of various solo business moves, and her massive shift toward building an independent, non-royal commercial venture. But the absolute most explosive claims, the specific hidden prenuptial clauses, the alleged secret postnuptial amendments, the shocking claim that Prince Harry blindly signed something without understanding it, absolutely none of that has been independently verified. There is absolutely no publicly available evidence confirming any of it. What we are ultimately left with is a highly chaotic situation where a deeply respected, highly feared investigative journalist with a massive track record of uncovering uncomfortable hidden truths is making incredibly serious, potentially devastating claims about the legal and financial architecture of one of the absolute most famous, scrutinized marriages in the entire world. But the hard, concrete evidence that would legally prove those claims, the actual signed documents, the specific hidden clauses, the verified legal amendments, remains fiercely, permanently private. Tom Bower genuinely believes that Prince Harry has made massive, life-altering legal decisions whose long-term financial consequences he may only now be slowly beginning to understand. That absolutely remains his personal assessment rather than an independently verified fact, and honestly, whether you think Tom Bower is brilliantly uncovering a massive, real story or simply connecting random dots that aren't actually there, probably depends entirely on how you already feel about Harry and Meghan Markle. But the massive questions he is raising about the underlying financial structure of their high-profile partnership are absolutely valid questions, even if the answers aren't publicly available. The fact that so much of this remains completely unverified absolutely doesn't mean it's false. It just simply means we can't confirm it. And in a massive, sprawling story where the central terrifying claim is that a British prince signed something he didn't fully understand, the complete inability for the public to verify anything is honestly kind of the whole point.